The first picture my family ever had of me in the cradle, there was a cat in the cradle. So I've always loved cats, but I never had any idea that I would be rescuing big cats until we ended up at that auction in 1992. It started with the rescue of that first bobcat in 1992, but we didn't become a nonprofit organization until 1995. In the very beginning, the only people we could turn to for advice were breeders and dealers. And they told us these are endangered species and you should breed them for future generations. And we believed them. But as I learned more, I learned that none of these cats can ever be released to the wild. And none of them can be traced back to their original, what they call founders, the cats that they came from in the wild before they ended up in zoos, before they ended up in people's backyards. So they have no conservation value whatsoever, and as soon as we learned that, we stopped breeding, which was in 1997. Most of our cats in the early years came from the fur farm rescues, because we rescued 56 off one fur farm, then 28 off a fur farm, and then 22 off a fur farm. So out of 100 cats, I mean, that's a lot of cats right there that just came from fur farms. But since then, most of the cats come to us because people get them as pets, and then they never make good pets. And so as soon as they get to be adults, people get rid of them, and that's how they end up coming to us. But on the larger scale, as far as like where most of the problem is, it's because people will pay to have their picture made with a cute tiger cub or lion cub. And the people who do that then give away the cubs when they're too old to use to people who get them as pets, who then get rid of them when they can't deal with them getting bigger. So, you know, a lot of people think this is a pet trade problem, and it's really not the pet trade that drives it. It's that people will pay to have their picture made with cubs, and that creates all of these cubs that then end up with no place to go. Well, it depends on the cat. So for like a lion or a tiger, it costs us about $10,000 a year. And that's just for the direct costs. That's the food and vet care. That doesn't include all of the overhead of running the sanctuary. For the entire sanctuary with about 100 animals, it takes about $2 million a year. We have 2 vets, and both of them volunteer their time. We have to pay for things like x-rays and lab work and that sort of thing. But both of those vets come out twice a week. So twice a week, 2 veterinarians are walking around the property checking on the cats. And they get their vaccines every single year like they're supposed to. They get dewormed every month. They get flea treated by the vets. I think they do that monthly. And so in the process of the vets being around the cats so frequently, it's not like they have like an annual date that they say, okay, this is going to be the exam date, because they're seeing them all the time. We can usually rescue 5 or 6 cats per year, sometimes as many as 10 or 11, but we can only take cats in as our older cats die of old age, and some of our cats have lived almost 30, so it's a long waiting list for a cat to get in. You know, in 2003, we had to turn away 312 cats in a single year, and every other year that number was doubling. But in 2003, there was a federal bill that was passed that made it illegal to sell a big cat across state lines as a pet. What happened the very next year, instead of having to turn away 500 or 600 cats, we only had to turn away 160. So that was like half of the number from the year before. Yeah. So since then, what we've tried to do is spend a lot more of our time and energy on changing the laws, because it's hard to reach all of those people who are out there petting cubs and get them to not do that. But if you change the laws to where it's illegal, like now it's in New York, it's illegal, then all those cubs aren't bred and discarded by that practice. So that's where we're focusing our attention. So as each year, there have been, I think, 11 more states that have passed bans and partial bans on the private possession of big cats. So those numbers drop from 165 down to about 30 or 40 calls a year now that we have to turn away. So we can take in 5 to 10, but we still get about 30 calls where we can't. It's 67 acres. And probably what's most unique about us is the size of our cages. Even a little bobcat has a 1,200 square foot cage. So most people's houses are only 1,200 square feet. Our cat has that much space for that one cat. Our tigers have anywhere from 2,400 square feet up to several acres each. So most sanctuaries you'll find are just very tiny. Our average lifespan across all of our different cat species is 17. We've had cats, like I said, one lived to be within a month of being 30 years old. Just last year, we lost a tiger who was 25, and at the time, he was the world's oldest tiger. Right now, I think somewhere between 20 and 30 of our cats are over the age of 20. We're allowed to let lions, tigers, and cougars into the big 2.5-acre vacation rotation. But we did a big fundraiser last year and raised money to build a vacation rotation for the smaller cats. We're just going to have to put a roof over the whole thing. So they will have an area, and we've got the area cleared out for them already. We just haven't built it. A couple of reasons. One is we don't want to have any accidents. I can't tell you how many places call themselves sanctuaries, and every year they say, oh, we had an accidental cub. Well, if they have accidents every year and don't know what causes cubs to be born, they shouldn't be in charge of taking care of those animals. So there's never going to be a case here where somebody accidentally gets pregnant because our cats are fixed. I don't think there is any way that you could ever release a captive born big cat back to the wild. I know that the zoos, the accredited zoos, tried to do that with ocelots several years ago, and we were actually part of that because we had bred ocelots. And what we wanted to be able to do was to send these ocelots back to the wild in Texas where they used to live, but they've been hunted to extinction. And so all the ocelots ended up being killed by the rattlesnakes because the ocelots that they had in the zoos all came from Central and South America where these cats eat snakes. They released them into Texas where the primary snake there is a rattlesnake. They don't have those snakes in Central and South America. And so the whole thing just collapsed because nobody knew that these cats have regional instincts. So if we can't even release an ocelot back to the wild, there's no way we're going to be able to release lions and tigers and leopards back to the wild. And the big problem isn't that those animals are dying off from some disease or something. It's the fact that we don't have enough protected space for them. So if we just protect the land where those animals are native to, their numbers bounce back really quickly because they breed like cats, for crying out loud. When we first bring them in, we put them into quarantine. And so what that is for us is not like in a hospital cage, but they have a 1,200 square foot or larger enclosure, but we try to put it someplace or put them in an enclosure that is away from the other animals and certainly away from the foot traffic of people visiting, so that they have some time to get used to their surroundings and their keepers. For the first 30 days, they only have a very small number of people who take care of them, so maybe 2 or 3 of our keepers will be the ones interacting with them for the first 30 days so that they're not overwhelmed, because we have 80 volunteers and anywhere from a dozen to 18 interns. So they get to gradually get used to the changes here. What we see is really amazing. Some cats get here and the first day they're like, woohoo, this is the greatest thing ever. And other cats will, they've been so badly abused where they came from. There was this one cat, he was a bobcat, and his owners had just left him behind to die, and so he had tried to dig out of the cage and push through the wire, and he had just worn his feet all the way down to the bones, and his face was just scraped all the way down to the bones. And so when he came here, I worked with that cat every single day for 5 years before the cat finally came up and rubbed up against the cage one day when I was out there. And it was I just bawled like a baby because he finally felt secure, like nobody was ever going to hurt him again. He was just the greatest cat. He died years ago of cancer, but he was the longest. Most of them take about 2 weeks. I think the worst part of the exotic pet trade is not so much that people think, I want to go out and buy a tiger. It's that people think, I want to go out and have my picture made with a tiger, because those cubs can only be used for they're used usually between 8 and 12 weeks. So after they're 12 weeks old, USDA says they're too big to be used for that purpose. And the people, like the people that that do it, will often just give them away to people because they don't want a cat that's going to cost them $10,000 a year if it's not making any money for them. So they're constantly giving them to people. And then those people, when the animal gets to be 150, 200 pounds, realize, oh my gosh, what did I get into? And then they are desperately looking for a sanctuary to rescue the animal. So I don't think it's those, it's 2 sets of ignorant people. The people who are ignorant of the situation and have their pictures made, and then the people who are ignorant of the fact that a tiger will grow up to be a 500-pound cat. So those are the two driving forces behind this whole thing. We have had a federal bill pending for the last 4 years, and we are working on reintroducing it in this session, which just started 1st of January. And that bill is called the Big Cats and Public Safety Protection Act. And what that does is it eliminates the private possession of big cats. And that's my dream law. If people can't own these animals as pets, and the people who are breeding them can't use them as photo props, then the only breeding that will be going on are within the SSPs in the accredited zoos. And even though I don't agree with that, at least it's a very limited number of animals that'll have to languish in cages for the rest of their lives. And it stops all of that other abuse, because there's no situation in which a tiger should be kept in a backyard cage or in a basement. There's no situation under which a tiger should be in some nasty little roadside zoo where nobody is looking into what kind of food they're getting or what kind of veterinary care they're getting. All of those things would be done away with. And what the bill does is the law would allow people to keep the animals they have, because we don't want all these animals to end up with no place to go. The sanctuaries can't take them all in. The only time we introduce adult cats to each other is if they're very young adults. So like with Max and Marianne, they were bobcats that were, I think, like 3 years old and 5 years old. And they're still kittens mentally until they're about 5. So if we can put them together before then, it gives them somebody they can play with, and they can chase each other, and they can keep each other warm when it's cold outside. It's just, it's a relief to the boredom of living in a cage. But you're right, most cats don't want to live together. We just, about last week, I think, tried to introduce 2 adult tigers, but the reason that we did that was Keisha and Zeus. They already knew each other, they grew up together. They had an adjoining wall in their cage when we rescued them, so we felt like they had probably been together most of their lives. And what brought it to our attention was we sent Keisha on vacation, and all she wanted to do was call all the way across the sanctuary to Zeus. And when we sent him on vacation, all he wanted to do was call across the sanctuary to her. So it was like, all right, we're going to fix both of these cats, and then we're going to send them on vacation together. Most of the time when cats come here, they're so sick or in such bad condition that we can't anesthetize them to do that kind of work, so we have to wait until they're strong enough. We feed 500 pounds of raw meat every day. The way that breaks out is usually a tiger or a lion will eat anywhere from 10 to 15 pounds a day. A bobcat might eat 3 pounds a day. And then it kind of, in between cats, you can kind of figure how much that is per cat, and it's different based on how old they are, how much activity level they have. That's why when you ask about special diets, I laughed, because our whole freezer is full of special diet buckets for each of the cats that is on limited food or more food than the others because of their individual needs. The food that we feed is the primary diet is from I don't think anything ever was as horrible as the first fur farm rescues, because there were just so many animals there that were suffering in ways that you just can't even imagine. These lynx were being kept in cages that were probably 2 feet by 3 feet, and that's what they lived in for their entire lives until they were slaughtered for their fur. And so if you can imagine just all of the feces and rotting animal bones, and they don't get any kind of vet care. It was just the most horrific thing I've ever seen. The flies in there were so thick we had to put handkerchiefs over our faces just to be able to breathe. The fur farmers were raising these animals, and they were selling some of them as pets, and then whatever they didn't sell as pets, they were slaughtering the next year for their fur. And so when we found out about that, what we said is, how much for every cat here? And so we would never pay for cats now, because we understand now that if you pay the ransom for the animal, you're just encouraging that same trade. But back then, we didn't know any better, so we paid top dollar to take every animal they had, as long as they wouldn't kill cats again for their fur. There's no way that you can legally go in and just take somebody's animal. And they would never have just abandoned those animals, because they could get money out of them by selling them to another breeder. So it's something that we did back then, but like I said, we haven't bought any animals since 1997 or 98. It's funny you should ask that, because since I'm the CEO, I just sent out an email today to all of our staff saying, give me a list of what you do every day. And so I started thinking, well, what are the things that I do every day? And the things I do mostly are making sure that all of those other people that work here, we have about 14 paid staff, 80 volunteers, and like I said, a dozen to 20 interns, making sure that all of those people are doing all of the stuff that they're supposed to be doing. I deal with about 150 to 200 emails a day. And those emails are things like, somebody from Sri Lanka may be asking me, what do I do about this kind of cat that we just rescued because it got hit by a car, and how do we take care of it? Or all of our volunteers, every day when they go out and clean the cages, they then, if there's something that they see that they think the vet needs to know, or that if there's a cage maintenance issue, they have to come and log it into a computer, it sends me a text right away on my phone that tells me, hey, this cat's been licking at her fur. So I spend a lot of time going out and checking all of those and make sure that the cats are doing well. We have a 2-person policy here. So like right before your call, I had to go out. We have a lion and a tiger that we were working on some maintenance issues in the cages, and so we had locked them into one side of the cage. But before the operations manager, who runs all of the operations here, before she could let them back into their whole cage, she has to come either get me or Jamie, who's my daughter, and we have to go out there and make sure that the cage is secure before the cats let back in there, even though there was no hole cut in the cage or anything like that. It's just a safety thing that we do, so I do an awful lot of that. Medical issues, I get involved in those. We have a very structured volunteer program. All of our paid staff, they only get paid to do things like manage other people or to manage the databases, to do bookkeeping kind of work, because people will do animal work for free. So all of our animal care, all of the feeding, cleaning, operant conditioning, which is like training of the animals to do things we need them to do for medical purposes, all of that's done by volunteers. So our volunteer program, when you first start, for the first 6 months, you're in a red shirt, just like a stoplight. So red is stop. You're not allowed to go anywhere by yourself. You have to work with somebody the whole time, and you're only allowed to work with the small cats. After 6 months, they can graduate to yellow. Yellow is cautionary. The cautionary level goes up to the cougars in size, so those people can take care of animals up to the size of cougars. After they've been here for 2 years, they can graduate to a green shirt. The green shirts are the ones who take care of the lions, tigers, leopards, the cats who could kill you. So they've had 2 years experience with the little cats before they ever get on the keeper side of the barricade with the big cats. And then the royal blue shirts that you see, the light blue, those are our interns. And they do all of those same levels, red through green, but they do them faster because they're here. And most people are only volunteering once a week, so they have kind of a fast track to learn. So they're at all different levels, even within the volunteer or the intern program. And then we have a navy blue shirt, and the navy blue are the people who are master keepers, and they're the ones who take care of like administering the medications and making sure the cats take their meds when they're supposed to, taking care of animals when they're in the cat hospital and that sort of thing. I have one Bengal cat hybrid that used to be here at the sanctuary, but that's a whole other topic. But the hybrids are kind of like worse than the wild cats because they're just tame enough that they aren't afraid of people at all, and yet they still spray and bite and do all the bad things that the big cats do. So we had one cat that had to either live in a cage here or live on my lanai, so she lives on my lanai. But I've had that cat now for 17 or 18 years. I can't touch her. She won't let me pet her. I have to run from her half of the time, but I have to run out there, clean up the horrific mess that she makes all over the lanai. She can't be around any other pets. And, it's at least a better life for her than living in a smaller cage, but that's my only exotic at home. The primary reason for so much suffering is that people want to be close to cubs. They want to see them up close. And people seem to feel like they have that right to do that, to pay their $7 and go to the zoo and see a cute little cub. But what they're not thinking about is for the next 20 years or more, that animal's going to be languishing in a cage somewhere. And all of the money that we spend going to zoos, going to sanctuaries, funding zoos and sanctuaries, if we put all of that money and energy into saving the habitat that these animals need, where they could live free the way they're supposed to, then that makes it a better world for all of us, because without the trees we can't breathe, and the only way people care about protecting the trees is because they care about the tiger who lives in the forest. So getting people to reallocate their donations and their conservation efforts into saving habitat is the only way that we're going to have a healthy planet and animals living free the way they should.